a new one, but that's right. Learn it. That's what we got to do, man. How can you get your stuff right if you don't learn it? Welcome to the Studio Q Show Live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you might be watching this or listening to this, I get emails at people that I don't watch your show, but I listen to it on the airplane or I listen to it at night or something. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Welcome to the Studio Q Show Live. And we're going to get going here. Good morning, Steve. Good to see you in here. And there's Demetrios and Samuel and Jean. I appreciate that, Jean. Jean gave me a layout of how to say Roland Bart, right? So there you go. People call me queer, queen, quan, kin. I don't care. I don't care what people call me. It's only a name, right? So I do like Cameron Lucida. It's a great book. If you missed that show last week, go back and watch it. We talk about some philosophy behind photography. So welcome. I got a great show for you today. Honestly, it's a technical show, but it's a great one. We're going to learn a lot, and you'll be able to put your comments or questions in throughout. So good morning, Will from Erie, PA. Good to see you. And if you're on Facebook and you want your name to appear in the comments so I can say who's asking the question or maybe a little bit of context, just allow StreamYard to put your name in there. Otherwise, it just shows up as Facebook user. Anyway, let's get on with this, guys, because Queen. That's right, Pablo. Queen. I love it. When I go to a coffee shop and they write your name on a cup, my name is Quinn. Forget it. Just put a Q on there. Close enough. Now, in America, Q is a dirty letter. So I got to watch that. Got to be careful. Let's get on with it, guys. Here we go. Let's share this screen. And everybody on YouTube, thanks for coming in. They're piling in right now. So that's good. I stall a little bit in the beginning because I get emails saying, hey, I didn't know you were doing that, and you're already into it, and I didn't see what you said before. Hey, Maureen and Dale, buongiorno. Yes, buenos dias, boker tov, guten morgen. How many languages? How many languages can we do? Good morning, good morning. And Maureen, why people photograph? Great, thank you for the. Oh, good. I'm glad you like that, Maureen. Look like a queen to me. I know, I do, Dale. Don't get. You got to keep. This is a family show, okay, Dale? Settle down, okay? Thank you. Hey, Linda, good to see you. And Jan from Norway, good to see everybody. We know what we're going to do today, right? We're going to go through some. Let me show this view present. We're gonna show some really interesting insights to some of the. What we just take for granted, really, some of the processes, some of the collodion, the salts, the solvents, the developer. I'm going to show you 4 books today that I think are pieces of 4 books that I think you'll like a lot. And this is what we're going to do today. We're going to look at technical Q&A, email this week, collodion recipes, ironically enough, tidbits from the 19th century. I got 4 of them that we're going to look through. And then photo critiques, Lawrence wanted to come in and show some work, and absolutely, thank you, come on in. Recommended reading and recommended watching, obviously. So let's jump right in here. Here was the question I got, and this is not uncommon at all. The only reason I'm addressing it now is there seems to be a peak, a crescendo of people asking about stuff like this, and then I say, okay, I'm going to answer it, put it in there. And I need to start tagging these videos with keywords so when people search my channel, they can find the videos they want to watch, because I know some of them are long. But anyway, collodion recipe. What's the right one, right? That's the big question. How do you determine what collodion you use? Anybody have an answer for that? Just personally, why you choose to use a collodion one over the other? Anybody? Anybody? No, it's okay if you don't. But let's see.
I use two, Quinn.
Yes.
I have two recipes. Which are my go-to recipes.
Okay, tell us about them, Lawrence.
That's your quick clear.
Okay.
That's the recipe I started 4 years ago when buying your book.
Okay.
The pros of your recipe is that it's quick use, can be made freshly 24 hours before a shoot, preferably 3 days before, but it's good and it's easy to make. Yep. And the other recipe I use is Old Dead Bride, OBD.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a sort of quick clear. Only the amount of chemicals are different. And
yeah, you know what, Lawrence? It's interesting you bring that up because I didn't put the email up here, but one of the emails I got was Jerome from California here asked why. He said something and use one over the other, and why so many names? What do they mean? I'm going to actually address that today, and it's interesting you mentioned that particular recipe, the Old Dead Bride. I'm going to address some of these names and talk about what these collodions really are. But thank you for sharing that. Those are, okay. And I bet you, Lawrence, you're going to see in this show today, after we go through some of the technical, you may not be able to address the chemical aspects of it right now, but I bet you will be after you see this, because at the end of the day, we are going to talk about not necessarily names, but what the distinct properties of these collodions are and what they are and why they are, kind of thing, right? That's what Jerome's asking here. And he just said, really nice words in the beginning, but he says, my question's about the collodion recipes. I'm just starting out, totally confused about what collodion recipe to use. I get these all the time. Can you please explain what the differences are between all of these? I can't really see any difference from the plates I've seen. Why would I use one over the other, and why so many names, and what do they mean? Great questions, right? Can you make it simple for newbies? Newbies, that's an intro. Newbies, I like that. Thank you, Jerome. I'm sure you're watching. I think he said he's going to watch on YouTube. This is what he sent me. And I'm not sure the reference on this, but this is what he sent me. So he said, this is what I've been looking at. And there, Lawrence, you saw that down there, the Old Dead Bride. You guys are going to have an enlightening time today, because I'm going to clear the air on this collodion stuff. It's simple. It is so simple. It is unbelievably simple and easy. The only difference between all of these, and this person, I don't think Jerome put this together. I think this is probably from he didn't tell me where. He just said, here's what I'm looking at. But these are some of the most famous ones, right? Or the most used one. Old Workhorse there. You see that? These new guy ones are from an old book of mine from 2006. Old guy and new guy, negative collodion, new guy collodion, new guy. And all that is, and Lawrence can see this, this is just a quick, clear recipe. My recipes are slightly modified from Hardwick's book. That's who I really relied on when I was writing and testing my recipes. And I'll tell you why I use what I use. But look, the bottom line here, this can be overwhelming. But if you were to synthesize this down and look at the collodion recipes just on the basis, we all know they have plain USP collodion. We all know they have solvents, ether and alcohol, right? We'll talk about what the variations on those are, even on the quantity of collodion. But let's look at the salts. And if you were to add up all these salts collectively, whether there's 2 salts or 4 salts, you're going to come around 3.1, 3.2 grams on the positive side. If you add all these up, right? So let's just take Lee's landscape number 7 down there. If you add it up, 0.6, 1.6 plus 5 is 2.1. 2.1 is 3.5 right there. That's 3.5 grams of salt. Look at all of these. Look at all of them. Why this Old Dead Bride thing? I don't know what that is. I don't know where that name came from. This is just a KI collodion. That's all it is. Maybe somebody trying to sell something. I don't know. I'm not into that stuff. I'm not into gimmicks or ads or any of that crap for this stuff. You know, I mean, nobody needs to sell anybody anything. What they need to do is educate them on why they'd use one collodion over the other. So here's the BLUF, the bluff, bottom line up front. It's depending on the salt you use, primarily the iodide. So when we talk about iodized collodion, we're talking about collodion only with an iodide in it. When we talk about bromo-iodized collodion, we're talking about a collodion with bromide and iodide in it. Bromide takes such a lesser role, primarily for color, some detail, some greens I've noticed outdoors, you know, and I use cadmium. It gives the collodion a little more, it's viscous, it's not so runny, right? But bottom line is 2 salts. You have ammonium iodide, NH4I, and potassium iodide, Ki. Potassium iodide is not soluble in solvents. You're going to have the cloudy stuff. It's going to drop out. It's going to form a precipitate layer at the bottom of your, you're going to throw down salts, and you're going to have a white layer of salts at the bottom of your bottle when you use Ki. Ki is wonderful. What does Ki do for you, the potassium iodide versus the ammonium iodide? It gives you shelf life. It's not soluble in solvents. And today I'm going to bring you something nobody's ever seen before, I guarantee you. The role of ether. The role of ether and what that means. And pyroxylene and ether, nitrocellulose and ether. And we're going to talk about this in depth here in a minute. But the only difference, Jerome, if you're watching or listening to this, you decide on what you want to use and how you want to use it. The quick answer is, what variant are you using? Are you making positives, tin types, ambrotypes, and how often are you making plates? Are you making 2 plates or 4 plates a month? Are you making 30 or 40 plates a month, right? So the only difference is salted collodion is iodized or bromo-iodized collodion, the type of salt or salts you're using, iodides and bromides. And if you make a few plates a month, you want a longer shelf life, right? If you only, hey, Quinn, I want to make 250 or 500 mils of collodion, and I want it to sit in my cooler, in my dark room, in the dark, cool place for a month before I use it, or every other month, use Ki. Go with something like, you know, just the standard Ki recipes, right? There's tons of them out there. You just substitute ammonium iodide for potassium iodide. If you want to make negatives, or you make a lot of plates, like I usually do, use ammonium iodide. In fact, I'm going to show you an excerpt from one of the books here that just completely praises NH4I as a superior salt, and he gives reasons why, and we'll talk about that. Ki, potassium iodide is not soluble in solvents, like I said. So you're going to have that precipitate. There's nothing wrong with that. There's enough that hangs into the solution, but you have to clean your bottle. You have to maintain all of that, but you get a longer shelf life for sure. You can use it if it's not cleared if you want. You can clear it in the sun or a pan of warm water, things like that. But eventually it will clear. But keep in mind, all collodion with salts in it are constantly throwing down precipitates. They're constantly throwing down. Ki is a little more extreme that way. Have a little more precipitate, a little more material to throw down. That's why the old boys say, just leave your collodion alone 24 hours before you make a shoot, because your first few plates are going to be the best. Because once you disturb all of that, you're going to have problems with your images. And H4I, or ammonium iodide, gives great tonal range, provides contrast and density for negatives, but it decomposes faster. And we're going to look at Hardwich's book, and we'll look at that. Hey, Jamie, good to see Jamie. Mr. Rodriguez from Florida. Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Yeah, Samuel says, my personal recipe is, let's see what he says. Recipe, because it is fast with great tonality and holds up many months. And my negative recipe is modified to ripen faster and has, yep, there you go. That's it. That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. Speed and density. Names are meaningless. The only reason I gave names to those that I published 15 years ago is because I wanted people to understand that if you're just starting out, these are the easiest. Lawrence just made that comment too. Easy to make, easy to handle. But if you don't use it fast enough, it's going to turn red and only be good for, you know, certain applications. So those are the differences, Jerome. What salts you use, what variants you're working in. If you want to make negatives, if you only make a few plates a month, go with the KI. If you want long shelf life, go with the KI. If you're making a lot of plates, or you're making negatives, or you want that beautiful tonal range right off the bat, use NH4i. That's kind of my take on that process, or that question rather. You know, and you're going to see here, well, I didn't actually include it today because I had so much going on in this show, but one of the authors here in the book argues against another photographer's comments about NH4i decomposing and slowing their collodion down. And he makes a really good case. I'll show you the book here in a minute. He makes a really good case for that's not really accurate, fair or accurate. Okay, let's see. What does Dale say here? It's not fair to say shelf life becomes moot when one makes iodizer and smaller batches of working collodion. Yeah, we'll talk about iodizer. Iodizer will help you, but again, we're going to break down ether today and talk about what that means, and pyroxylene as well too. That plays a huge role as well in the breaking down of iodides. So remember Paul, I think Alsop, I hope I'm saying your name right, Paul. He's in New Zealand. He'll watch this later. But man, this just bugged me. There's rarely ever questions in collodion that I can't find an answer to. And I found the answer to this one by doing research this week or last week on this week's show. And this is beautiful. This comes out of Photographic Manipulation, one of the books we're going to look at today. And if Paul can chime in when he watches this and tell us if my theory, if Hannah's publication is correct and what he's saying here, and he's laying his book out like Holy Scriptures. Chapter 3, verse 57 says, if the plate is immersed too soon, streaks and fringes, or as photographers call them, curtains. What a beautiful name, curtains. Doesn't that make sense? I've seen this time and time again. And if his description is accurate and my hypothesis or theory is accurate, I say that bottom part of the plate was the drain edge where it would be the wettest. And he even says right there in his email, I thought it was not waiting long enough for ether to evaporate from the plate before the silver bath. His intuition was correct. And the reason he couldn't replicate it, probably, you're out of control on the environmental issues. You can't control what temperature by a degree or two, or humidity, or a few seconds here, a few seconds there. So that's why it was hard to replicate. But basically, these are called curtains, and they'll be observed from proceeding from the edge of the plate at which collodion was least dry. Now, I know you say, well, there's some up on her face too here, but you can see how sporadic that is, right? You can see it was something happening before the silver bath and before the developer. It's obvious. You can see that. And you can see the way the plate was immersed and everything. Really, really good information here. And then he goes on, this is the most frequent error. And keep in mind, this is from 1857. So this was early on. So a lot of photographers were struggling with these kinds of problems. As time went on, they got better and better, and they didn't struggle with these kind of basic things, right? He goes on, this is the most frequent error and one more fatal to success than the opposite. But we must be careful in avoiding one mistake that we do not fall into another. God, isn't that true? But by observation, learn the time suited to the collodion in use. Exactly. So he even distinguishes what kind of collodion are you using, right? He makes that declaration at the end. Find out the time for skinning over and submerging your plate in a silver bath by experimentation with the type of collodion you're using, right? Let's see. Oh, here's somebody new. Yeah, hence the advantage. Okay, Dale. Okay, let's go back to Dale's for just a second. It's not fair to say shelf life becomes moot when one makes iodizer. No, it's not. And smaller batches of working collodion. Hence the advantage of NH4i. Yes, that's a very good point. In fact, I think I've told you this story before. Sometime in the past. Wonderful photographer named Joel Snyder. He teaches at the University of Chicago. He made a whole series of beautiful ambrotypes, wet collodion negatives, daguerreotypes and I think even calotypes in the mid-1960s. And I contacted him. I said, whoa, you're making collodion images and doing all this stuff? And he said, yeah, I made a whole series of work for the Smithsonian in 1967. I found him in an old Kodak book, those old silver books that I have. I'll show you this someday, but when I get my books out. But I was so curious. I wrote him and I asked him. I said, what's going on here? Here's our little collodion community, and I don't recognize your name. He says, oh, I don't care. I did this stuff. I know how to do it, and blah blah blah. And we got talking. He said he still had a bottle of iodizer from Kodak from 1953 sitting on his shelf. And he told me, he says, I bet you I can take that iodizer and pour it in plain USP collodion and make plates with it. So that's a little bit of a testament to the length of it. But we're going to get into this a little deeper here in a minute, and we'll see if that would actually be true. There's Kaminsky 24. Welcome. Good. Welcome to the show. Completely new to this and don't even have a camera for this material. Only 4 years ago, I got back into film photography, went from knowing nothing about film to develop. Good for you. Way to go. Awesome. Color prints 35, 120. Good. Just recently 4x5. And the ultimate goal is to get collodion in the not too distant future, also working on 12x. Well, good for you. Come back to the show, get on the forum board. There's a lot of good folks here that'll help you out and get you going. Good to see new people. So that's called curtains, photographic manipulation, Thomas Hanna, and we'll have Paul chime in on this. So if you ever see this again, nobody will ever forget that this is what we're dealing with. Curtains, and it's from dropping your plate too early into the silver bath, period. And usually you have some other kind of weird stuff happen too. Mini photon, I like that name, mini photon, that's cool. Does temperature of the collodion solution help or reduce the speed? You can't really, the temperature of the collodion is always going to be cool because of the solvents in there. So you're not really going to, the temperature of the developer, the temperature of the silver bath will affect those things, obviously, but not the collodion. That's a fixed, known entity that way. So the others, not so much. So let's go over and see what okay, so that makes sense to everybody. And I bet you, if I'm right, that down in there in the corner is going to be our money shot. So these are the books we're going to look at. We're going to reference some of these books. You can screenshot this or come back and look at it. I highly recommend you go into Google Books and download these PDFs and read them. I'm going to cite everything I talk about today, so you can go back and double check me and make sure I'm right. This stuff, I rarely come on here and give my opinions about this stuff. And if they're an opinion, if I'm giving technical, I make sure I say it's an opinion. This is from the 19th century literature we're going to look at today. So everything here you're going to see. So we're going to start. Actually, you know what? Yes, that's true. I even threw in the silver sunbeam there, and you're going to see something interesting there. So let's start with this. Photographic manipulation, the collodion process by Thomas Hanna. That's the curtains guy that we just looked at on Paul's shot. So NH4I, the superior salt. Let's look at this. This is very, very interesting. And you pay attention to the verbiage here. This is block 30 of his book. The other curtains was 57. It'd be a great way to organize a book, right? Just go to 103 and read that. Just go to 28 and read that, right? Great way to make the book up. The difficulty of obtaining good ammonium iodide experienced formally is now no longer the reason for preferring the potassium salt or the potassium iodide, the Ki. So he's saying at that particular time in 1857, there'd been some problems obtaining good ammonium nitrate or NH4I, and he said that drove everybody to Ki. And he said there's no longer a reason for preferring the Ki salt. And although too unstable for the purpose of those who make large quantities of collodion for sale, it is much the more satisfactory to the practical photographer. Check that out. So he says if you're making great big loads of collodion, you probably don't want to use the NH4 salt, right? because we talk about how it breaks down, liberation of iodine turns red, blah, 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 right? But he says it's much the more satisfactory to the practical photographer. And I'm going to give you my reason why I think he says that. I think just like Lawrence said, you can make it quickly, easily, and it's ready to use. I've made it and used it right on the spot. Right on the spot. Made it and used it, right? So that breaking down, and you have to have an amount of iodine in that collodion for it to function, for the salts and everything to function with this double decomposition breakdown of AGI and AGBR. So he says it's much more satisfactory to the practical photographer. Its general working is much more equal, and a finer finish can be obtained in the negatives than by means of the other salts, right? Keep in mind, this is coming from people who worked in this stuff 24/7 all the time. They made a living from this stuff, more than likely. So these little tidbits, while they're opinions, they're still opinions that are based on a good framework, a good premise of where they're coming from. The context is important. Another reason for giving it the preference over the Ki salt is that when its decomposition is brought about in the bath, ammonium nitrate results instead of what? Potassium nitrate. Do you guys realize what that means you're putting in your bath with the Ki salt? You're releasing that other nitrate into your salt. You're releasing a potassium nitrate, not an ammonium nitrate. We'll talk about that. The reason for preferring the former of which will be mentioned when speaking of the bath. Exactly, exactly. Good stuff. So let's jump over, and I have to give you a little context on this. This is number 32. Before this, he was talking about how you can put a zinc strip or a silver strip in old red collodion and reinvigorate it, how it bonds and it releases the silver iodide, and he explains all that. So that's the context of this. That's why he says, unfortunately, however, these, like many other good remedies, go a little too far. Now, he's not a big fan of doing that stuff. It is necessary to perfect working of collodion that a minute quantity of free iodine should be present in it on account of its power of preventing fog or cloudiness. How many emails do I get every month with a snapshot of a plate that's all veiled or fogged over and overexposed and all that stuff all the time? And a lot of times this is a new collodion with an old bath, or a new collodion that's made with salts that don't break down fast enough. So you don't get that minute amount of iodine in collodion. That's what gives you your fog and your cloudiness and your overall malaise of the plate. How about this? I have to look at these comments here every once in a while. Hey, awesome from the UK. Mr. C. And here's Demetrios. Can we just take a minute and enjoy how magnificent Deshaun's beard looks? How about that? How about that? How about we do that? Let's not get too stuffy here. How about we do that? Look at that. That's magnificent. Awesome. Yeah, you got to appreciate that for sure. Very, very good point. Very good.
Easiest thing I've ever done in my life, Quinn.
The most committed you've been. You know, I've let mine go for a while, and I like having hair on my face, but it reminds me of Gerard's images last weekend, Rasputin. And when I think of Rasputin, I think of, the evil one from Russia kind of thing, right? And the only thing I can think of is rotten food in his beard. They talked about how extreme he was and everything. So that's what I'd have. I'd come on the show with a big old, spaghetti and meatballs in my beard. That's good. You're so right about that. That's worth mentioning there for sure. So anyway, yeah, we can take a break from this once in a while and do that. That's good. So unfortunately, like these, okay. So iodine should be present on account of fogging, cloudiness, general malaise. So in practice, it will be found necessary to add sufficient tincture of iodine to affect this. So what he's saying there, he's just saying, look, if you make fresh collodion and you're not getting that release of iodine in there, you know, the liberation of that, you know, the iodide breaking down, liberation of iodine from those salts, your images are going to be bad. They're not going to look good. And you see this all the time, especially for newbies, like Jerome said. So at the end of the day, the need for iodine is real. So keep all these little bits in mind because they do play a huge role in this stuff. So let's talk about used silver bath red collodion, the perfect negative. Are you serious? Let's talk about this for a second. Hi, Tim. I haven't seen Tim for a while. There he is. Do you recommend exposing H4A to air, allowing it to start breaking down before making collodion? Yes. Like I said, Tim, I've done that so many times. I make a batch of collodion up and go out, pour it on plates, and use it right off the bat. And that's with the NH4I already oxidizing, like you're saying. Doesn't take much, but if you keep freshly packed ammonium iodide packed in, sealed tight, no oxygen, no air, no moisture, nothing getting to it, it'll take a couple of days to break down. It'll take a day to break down, even if it's super fresh. But like Tim says, if you open that up and let air and moisture get to it, it starts oxidizing and breaking that down. It may even get a tinge of yellow to it or brown or whatever color you might want to say. And you use that, your collodion's ready to go. I like that stuff personally, but I probably make more plates than most people. So yes, Tim, I do like that a lot. Number 68. Oh, here we go. Samuel has it. Yes, expose it to air. I had extreme problems with fresh NH4I, changing the color every day from red to green to yellow. Maybe I do remember that. Yes, I do. You're right about that. I remember some of the questions coming in, some of the more interesting ones, but I do. I know Samuel's issue there. I remember it. So number 68, if a bath has been in use some time, meaning you have to read this stuff in context. It's not use in some time for us. Like, oh, I made 20 plates this month. That bath is in use. These guys were making 20 plates in a day. I mean, seriously, in use. Take this in context. Remember the context of how this was written. If a bath has been in use sometime and old collodion containing much free iodine been excited in it, remember my little graph, my little bottles colors, highly iodized, slightly iodized collodion? That's exactly what he's talking about here. That's exactly what he's talking about here. Much free iodine's been in it, a large accumulation of nitric acid. Keep this in mind. Nitric acid liberated by the union of iodine with the silver of the bath will be found in it. Now, everybody knows I'm quite vocal and public about this. People who boil their silver baths need to remember and understand the chemistry, right? You don't even know what's in your silver bath. You don't even know the byproducts released from double decomposition, and you're boiling your silver bath. That is so dangerous, guys. I'm not going to harp on this again. I'm just saying, here's an example of the release of nitric acid into your bath because of double decomposition and iodine. I know it may get complicated, but just keep this in mind. This is which gives a rise to the state mentioned in the preceding paragraph, which must be remedied there by pointing it out, basically getting the acid out of there, right? Maintenance front. Beginners, this is the best part, or one of the better parts. Beginners must not be deterred, however, by this statement from using collodion that has been mixed for some time, for it is by the use of it in a nearly neutral bath that the best negatives can be most easily obtained. So I had an old photo editor tell me one day, I came back from a photo assignment working in a newspaper, and this photograph ran all over the world, went out on the AP wires, newspapers in Italy and everywhere in the world had this image. It was the first Gulf War. I photographed some pilot flying off to fight in the war. And he said to me, whose photograph is this? And I said, that's mine. He said, oh man, even a blind groundhog finds an ear of corn now and then. And it reminded me of this because every once in a while, someone will say, oh my God, I went out and made some negatives today, and they are amazing. I've never been able to do this. And now I wonder, as I put this together, if the stars align just right and the stupid luck comes our way, and oh my God, everybody's had this kind of stuff and happen in wet collodion. And we don't know why, because we don't understand the chemistry and the physics behind it. So at the end of the day, when you start reading and you read in detail this 19th century literature, and I recommend everyone, contemporary stuff is okay, even mine, but man, go back to the old resources. Go back and source those and read them. They will give you so much insight. I always say, people ask me, why did you write a book, Quinn? Well, I tell them I did it for two reasons. One, I needed to complete 30% technical in a graduate degree I was doing, so I needed to write some portion of a technical book. And secondly, I didn't really learn the process properly when I learned it. So what it forced me to do was go deep into the chemistry, deep into the old literature, and then be able to sort that stuff out and learn how it really worked. But go to the old literature. I highly recommend going to and I always say, if you get a book like mine, that will help you to get your toe in the water, so to speak, and not be frightful of it. And especially if English isn't your first language, opening up these old manuals like, what in the hell is he saying? God. And then you parse it out, and he says in a paragraph what I can say in one sentence. Those are some of the other reasons I did this, or I wrote books on this process. But this is always good to see this in context and always be able to keep that in mind as you're reading them. So interesting point here from Mr. Henna. I like it, I like it, I like it. Let's jump into Hardwich's books. Hardwich's books are my favorite. They're absolutely some of my favorite. He's really, he started writing early. I think this is the 6th edition of his book, but he started writing early and progressed and changes and really documented everything well. But when I was reading in his book, the top part of this doesn't mean much of anything. It's that last paragraph. The plain collodion ought to be kept in the dark, or the ether will rapidly ozonized. Will be ozonized by the pyroxylene, page 104. A cool cellar and cupboard will answer the purpose. So he's talking right now, your plain USP collodion, that's what he's talking about. Not mixed, not anything. He's talking about keeping it cool and in the dark. And let's see what he says on page 104. Collodion iodized with the potassium iodide, ammonium iodide, zinc, magnesium, any of them, assumes a yellow tint, which in the course of a few days or weeks deepens to a full brown. Interesting choice of color words, right? Brown. I've never had mine brown, orange, but brown. Okay, whatever. This gradual colorization is due to development of free iodine by a particular action of the ether. Keep this in mind. Has anyone ever asked you why, when you mix the salts together in the collodion, this process of breaking this iodide into iodine starts? What does that? Is it the pyroxylene? Is it the alcohol? Is it the water? What is it? It's the ether. It's the ether. And years ago here in America, just a quick side note here, years ago here in America, and maybe there's somebody out there that still actually remembers what happened here. Years ago, there was a handful of people in this process, right? You could name everybody, right? Not so much anymore. But years ago, it was a small community, and all of a sudden, everybody started mixing up collodion one day, and it went pink. You mix it with pink. I mean, pink, like fuchsia, not red, pink. And man, we dug and we dug and we dug and we dug and we dug. And guess what it was? There was a batch of anhydrous ether, diethyl ether, that hadn't been washed. It had acid in it. And it was breaking down the salts. It didn't matter what salt you used. It was breaking them down so fast. And you read these old manuals, they're constantly talking about the cleanliness of these products. There are whole chapters and paragraphs and verses dedicated. You got to make sure that this is the clean, check on this, do that. Not so much today, but years ago, I would imagine this is 15 years ago anyway, that happened in the community. Everybody's collodion went pink. And I think it was Mike at Artcraft that came out and said, yeah, we have acid in the ether. They didn't wash it. Does anybody know how ether is made? Anybody know how ether is made? It's made with sulfuric acid and nitric acid sometimes. But there are a lot of acids in that ether. And if it's not washed clean and you have an acid in your ether, your collodion is going to turn real quick, because you're going to see here, that's what the basis of this is. Particular action of the ether, which is a fluid very prone to decomposition. Ether may, with proper precautions, be preserved for a long time in a pure state. But upon exposure to joint action of air and light, it undergoes a slow process of oxidation, attended with formation of what? Acetic ether. Acetic ether. So keep this in mind. And peculiar principle resembling in properties ozone or oxygen. So when we talk about ionization or the ozone coming in, ozone is, we'll get to that. It properties ozone or oxygen in an allotropic and active condition. Potassium iodide or ammonium iodide is decomposed by ether in this state. The ozonized substance liberating iodide, which dissolves and tinges the liquid yellow. So there you go. You've learned something today. Acetic ether acts upon the salts in your collodion, whatever salt, it doesn't matter which salts, and breaks down the iodides and liberates the iodine into the solution. The acetic ether. And that's the decomposing ether, keep in mind. So going on, just liquid yellow, right? It does that very quickly, by the way. Ether containing pyroxylene dissolved tends to assume the above state more quickly than pure ether. So now, let me diagram this for you so you get it. Now we're talking about the first paragraph. We say we mix this ether and alcohol and salts together, and you have this acetic ether release. It starts breaking down the salts, not as rapidly, right, as when you pour it in the pyroxylene or nitrocellulose. And that's what he's going to say here. You have the first stage, the acetic ether will break those salts down, or the iodides down. And now you add pyroxylene or collodion, nitrocellulose to it, and listen to what he says. Containing pyroxylene dissolved tends to assume the above state more quickly than pure ether. So now you've doubled that breakdown. And especially so when pyroxylene has undergone decomposition and set free a portion of the nitrogen peroxide, right? Nitrogen peroxide. It is therefore of the utmost importance that plain collodion should be kept in a cool place, and especially that it should never be exposed to light. Even ordinary daylight will, in the course of 10 days or 2 weeks, fortnight, confer this property of striking an immediate color on the addition of the iodizer. Beautiful. Beautiful. Come on. That's like Holy Scripture to us, isn't it? I mean, right there, you get the idea of these small, intricate details affecting and accumulatively, so to speak, or building on itself, building up problems. And the problems that you see today, you see them today all the time. Oh, Mark remembers. Oh, Kaminsky says, "Are you talking about? I actually have this book. Are you? No, you're not nuts. You're smart. Good. Whatever book you have is 19th century is good. Bad ether. Mark remembers that. Yeah, everybody's pink collodion. Man, I feel like an old timer now. Dimitri, pink is your color, brother. Pink is definitely your color, brother. Sulfuric pink, no less. So there's the first portion, and that other page led me on to this. So I think we continue here. Let's see. So in addition to the iodizer, the straw yellow color, which usually follows in the course of an hour or so after iodizing collodion, is due to the ozonation. It's difficult for me to say that word. ozonation of the ether above described. But the further increase of that color on keeping the collodion for several weeks is more dependent upon the pyroxylene. For if the pyroxylene be omitted from the solution and the iodide added to the ether and alcohol simply, aka iodizer, right, then the development of free iodine proceeds very slowly. So I don't know, and maybe I do care a little bit, but I think I was the first one to publish using iodizers. I'd never seen that before. I just knew my practice of making iodizers and mixing it with collodion when I wanted it worked so well for me. And I know it doesn't work for everyone that well, but I was the first one to talk about this because all the old manuals, they all had iodizers and collodion separated. Salts and solvents and plain USB collodion, always separate. You never just make up a big batch. You talk about iodizer, you talk, because at the end of the day, we all don't make that many plates, not in comparison back in the day. But at the end of the day, this is they break down slower. They're less prone to turn red so fast. That's the iodizer. It will break down eventually. That's why, like I said, I was interested to hear. It was interesting to hear Joel Snyder's comments about it. He thought he could still use that iodizer from 1953. I would do it. I'd try it. The rate of change under the decomposing effect of pyroxylene is mainly affected by the stability of the particular iodide which is employed, right? So we're talking about using NH4I, ammonium iodide is the least stable of the iodides, like I said, and cadmium iodide, the most stable. Cadmium iodide, I have cadmium iodide, I've used it. You will never get your collodion to turn even straw yellow after a year. It'll be almost like water. That cadmium iodide refuses to break down. It's wonderful for stability. And cadmium iodide most so. Potassium iodide being intermediate, Ki being intermediate. So one side you have a very unstable salt, NH4I breaks down really quickly. In the middle you have Ki or potassium iodide, intermediate breakdown, and then cadmium iodide, which virtually never breaks down. I mean, it does, but it is a hardy salt. Collodion iodized with cadmium iodide usually remains nearly colorless to the last drop if made with pure ether and kept in a cool, dark place. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love it. So there's a little bit of the breakdown of the salts. Let's do a takeaway from this. What is the takeaway from all this rambling about chemistry and ozonization, and all this stuff? Ether will create ozone when exposed to oxygen. And it can also create what? Peroxides. We're not going to talk about peroxides today, but you know that you can read it in my book. You know those are very dangerous, and that oxygen and ether can also form peroxides. We already know it forms one peroxide, right? Nitrogen peroxide. We just saw that. The ozonation will create an environment for the liberation of iodine, meaning it will break down, release the iodide, turn them into iodine, turn your collodion red. Pyroxylene or nitrocellulose will further break down and liberate the iodines from the salt. Ozone is used for oxidizing, bleaching, disinfecting, and deodorizing. That's what ozone does. So it gives you a little idea. Great question, Dale. Is it fair to suggest then that prolonged shelf life is the primary reason for using? Yes, it is. That's exactly what it's used for. Prolonged shelf life, you can say there's some other elements there. Stability would fall into that definition. Glutenosity, speed, ISO, some particular colors in landscape, especially for a bromo iodize. If you're using a bromide in it as well as an iodide, those AGBR factors would come into play as well too here. Good, yes, exactly. I would probably tend to agree with that for the most part. So let's jump over to the Book of Photography by Mr. Hasluck, Paul N. Hasluck, or edited by him. It's a huge tome, some 800 pages or something. So this is the most important thing here. Collodion may be either iodized, or bromized, sorry. The former gives density and the latter detail. So check that out. Iodides give density, bromides give detail. And we need to clarify that just a little bit, because to say that in a big, broad, sweeping gesture, you have to look at it in context. And it's fair for him to do this in this book because you have all the other content. Text out of context is a pretext. Does that make sense? It means that I can pull any language out of any book, select a paragraph, and make anything up about it. You have to look at everything in context, right? So just to be fair, he does give context. And if you read this portion of this book, you'll see why. He's talking about how you get your salts in your collodion. He says it can be either iodized or bromized, meaning you can either use an iodide or a bromide to get it going, or both, right? And that's what we do. The former gives density, the latter detail. That is to say, the iodide gives a heavier deposit of silver in the lightest portions, and the bromide a more even density. For such work as the process is now used for, iodized or bromoiodized collodion answers best. Collodion may be purchased in plain state or iodized, or with the iodides or done up separately. A simple plan is to dissolve some ammonium iodide in a little alcohol in the proportion of 4 grains to each ounce of collodion. So then he goes on to give how you'd want to iodize or bromoiodize your collodion. Now, years ago, I made Archer's original recipe, which only included an iodide. He made negatives, right? He didn't make positives. So I used that in that Archer show that we did in London. That's what my triptych, my negative and my albumin and salt print, that negative was made with just iodized collodion, not bromoiodized. Okay, Jeffrey, all plain USP has ether, right? Yes. So there really is an ether-free collodion, just lesser. Yes, that's right. In fact, Jeffrey, you're absolutely correct about that. 70% plus. Totalists say ether is the main component in plain USB collodion. Paula says, being that I'll be unable to find ether any longer in my country, will it make sense to go for USP 8% or 10% dilute with more alcohol? Well, you know, that 8 or 10% collodion is only talking about nitrocellulose or pyroxylene. So your nitrocellulose content versus 4 to 8% or 8 to 10% is only nitrocellulose. It's not going to do anything for ether. You'd have to somehow, yeah, that sucks. That's too bad if you can't get ether. Ether is, yeah. That's good, Pablo. I didn't see that. We'll hear the famous Q-tips. I like that. I might steal that from you. Q-tips. That's it. No, I don't want to imply anything there. Yeah, good question, but unfortunately not. So you have to have the ether. And we actually, you know, for those of you in the know, Pablo's talking about, we actually add more ether even than what's already in it. So let's stick with that same book and let's talk about the silver bath. The takeaway here, he just talks about making the silver bath up. The making up of the silver bath is a very simple matter, but there are certain points which one must be borne in mind. For example, the bath may be either acid or neutral. Its condition in this regard being governed by the sensitive compound used, right? Let's keep that in mind. If the iodide is used so that the sensitive salt in the film consists wholly of silver iodide, the bath may be in a neutral state. Isn't that interesting? If the iodide and bromide are used together, then the bath should be faintly acid. Now I need to give you some context here. We are talking about making negatives. This is 1857. Or 1850s. I'll have to look at the year on that book. It's early, or this excerpt from it. So we're talking about making negatives. So if you're only using ammonium or potassium iodide, your bath can be pH 6, pH 7. Once you add that bromide in there, once you add ammonium, potassium, cadmium, whatever bromide you put in there, now you need to draw it down a little. You need to lower that pH. You need to take it down to 4, 5 maybe. Faintly acid is what he talks about. And if bromide alone is used, it must be more strongly acid. Now you're talking about pH 3, 2.5. Now you're really jacking that acid up to get the process to work, right? You start understanding how photography works in this manner. You start understanding the power parts of hydrogen, pH, the acid and the basic, how that process, that double decomposition process works in the presence of an acidic bath or a neutral bath or a basic bath. You start understanding this stuff, it'll make sense to you. It's the application, how much AGI you're laying down, or AGBR, both, if you're using a bromide. The safest plan, at any rate, for a beginner is to have the bath faintly acid, even when using iodide only. So you can do a pH 4, pH whatever for your positives, that's fine. The actions of the nitric acid is to prevent the spontaneous or independent reduction of the silver, thereby keeping the shadows clear and free from fog. How many plates have you seen where there's no black on them? You don't have a black anywhere. That's part, and that you see them all the time. It's a rhetorical question, but that is mostly due to this kind of stuff. Silver bath ranks way up high on people's problems. I mean, not always, but boy, it can rank way up there. And he goes on to talk about the proper amount of bath, and depending on what you're doing. So saturating with silver iodide. This operation is spoken of as saturating with silver iodide. In practice, it's usually best to dissolve the silver in half with water, then add the iodide, shake it up, the remainder of the water, filter it when the acid may be put in. If the solution is more than saturated, the plate will come out with sparkling particles of metallic silver. And I know you guys have had that happen. I get emails with, why is this so sparkly? Oh my God, my plate is sparkling. There you go. That's why. And when people send me email and photographs of their plates and ask me questions, I want it desperately. I mean, I become preoccupied with this stuff, right? It's like a puzzle to me. But without the full context of everything, it's so difficult. You know, it's so difficult to kind of be an armchair technician from either 10 miles away or 5,000 miles away. It's just difficult to troubleshoot sometimes because there's so many variants. But then you can get some barium nitrate, 1 parts to 50, and you can knock those shiny silver spots off if you don't want them. So I suck at guitar. No ether here either. Oh, so poor boy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and we're gonna talk about that in just a second. You saw that recipe. Can I go back just real quick? I want to go back here and just really address that real quick. Where are our collodion recipes? Well, we've gone through a lot of these, huh? Here we go. So she just said, where's it at? Poor boy, po boy. Cadmium free, no added ether. So it's the ultimate in safety, right? So you plain USP collodion, ethanol, potassium iodide, Ki, and potassium bromide, KBr. So you're going to have, that's 110, 100. Yeah, that's 250. Okay. So here's the only issue that I have. Pablo's in the same boat. There's a lot of people that can't get ether or don't want to, or can't get cadmium bromide or don't want to, or whatever. So here's the thing. When you use all that alcohol, and man, I would recommend, if you can get medical grade 100% anhydrous alcohol, water-free alcohol, if you can get that, that will help a lot. Here's the problem. When you add water and collodion together, this old literature is constantly talking about how injurious water is to collodion. And what they mean by that, the beginnings will create crepey lines and chambered lines and cells. You saw that on Gerard's plates last week. That's just the beginning of it, right? In the extreme case, you saw posted that 40%, I can't remember the guy who used that alcohol that's like half water. You just don't get anything. But when you use this poor boy or po boy, and you use all alcohol and no ether, you're introducing a lot of water into that collodion. And collodion can become like wet toilet paper with that much water, and it becomes really weak, and it's really difficult. emails. Why can't I push a cotton ball over my plate under the wash? What's your recipe? I'm using po' boy. And then some other people, I don't have any problem with it. I can scrub it. I can do all kinds of things. So it's partly environmental, but a lot of water in that alcohol can really cause problems in the collodion if you're not careful. So just keep that in mind. Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Just what is just distill sulfuric with ethyl alcohol? There you go. He wants to make ether. Does the amount of nitrocellulose affect the durability of the collodion on the plate? When I brush a collodion with a soft camel, leaves many tiny scratches. Right. That's partially due to your salts, your sensitization. So the silver rides just on top of the collodion and underneath of it. It should embed a little bit. I just read yesterday where I think it was Hanna or Hardwich, maybe it was Hardwich. He said that he can make a negative with a collodion so tough he doesn't even have to varnish for the first few prints. There's no injury because the silver is embedded into the collodion, he says. So there's a lot of that going on. So you want to have the pyroxylene, the solvents, the silver bath, and the salts just perfect to get the optimal application, the amount, and how it's applied, how deep it is, how on the surface and underneath. And if you don't have it underneath, if you just have that writing on the surface and you take a camel hair brush and you see those marks, it may mean that you have some unexposed silver that's developed there as well too, right? Because if you burnish your image down, that creamy color, if you have that creamy color, you can burnish that bright part of the plate down to bright silver metallic color. That will tell you how deep. Just take a plate, make a plate, the best exposure you can do, and test it. That'll tell you how deep your collodion, how deep your silver is embedding or sitting there. It's good, great question though. Yes, tiny scratches. I see that quite a bit. Tiny scratches. Thank you so much for this live, Quinn. Greetings from Argentina. Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Ken Savers, that is so right. Where can you get ether in the States? You're right. You know, Anita at Chem Savers, she's died now. What a sweet lady she was. Her boys run that now. And man, she was a sweetheart. I worked with her for years. Chem Savers is great. They've got high percent collodion. They've got ether. They've got everything you need. It's awesome. Steve, so would such a collodion be considered non-contractile? You'd have to, yes, I would say yes. I would say yes to that. If I understand the question right, I would say yes to that. One thing that will contract collodion is pyrogallic acid. Remember, that's why we sub the edges of our plate, because that'll shrink or contract collodion. So there are some things you have to watch that way. But yes, I think I understood that. I hope, Steve, you let me know. What specific grade of nitrocellulose? Okay, mini photon, this is a great question. If you're just making positives, ambrotypes and tin types, 4% nitrocellulose will do. If you go into pop printing, especially aristotypes, colloidal chloride, you need 5% or higher, preferably higher. The cotton content in that needs to be great, or you're never going to be able to apply that to paper and create an emulsion with that collodion. It's just not strong enough. So 4% for positives, 5+ for pop printing. Those are, and usually you're going to have a total of say 70% plus ether, 20% alcohol, ethanol, and 4 to 8% nitrocellulose, or 5 to 10%, whatever you buy. I hope that answers it. Oh, USP grade, yeah. Anybody can, Dale, can you tell me what USP, what is that acronym? Oh, good. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. What does USP stand for? Anybody? I always do this. Ferris Bueller? Ferris Bueller? Somebody will answer. USP. Lee 7 with no ether. Yeah, good. Okay, Pablo says Lee number 7 with no ether worked pretty well. Tried it last week. Good. No, you know, Pablo, if you can't get ether, you can't get ether, brother. We'll get you up here in Colorado sometime. You can bathe in ether here. Get a big tub of ether and just frolic in it like this. It's so abundant. Yes, United States Pharmaceutical. Awesome. Very good, Dale. That's great. That's what USP Collodion, people ask me that all the time. What's USP? Or what is a CAS number? Anybody know what CAS? You know the CAS numbers I print in my book before the name of the chemical? Chemical Abstraction Services, right? CAS. It doesn't matter. It just means it's a universal number. I always tell people, don't buy chemicals by their name. Never, ever, ever. Buy them by the CAS number. The CAS number is universal. I don't care if you're in the Netherlands or in Saudi Arabia or in Norway. It doesn't matter. The CAS number is going to be universal. Always, always order by CAS. Yes. And Dale runs a great little chemistry outfit up there in Canada. And so he's up on, for you Canadians, he's up on all this. So yeah, it's all in the safety data sheet. You're absolutely right. And look, I even put an extra L in all, just to emphasize all. It's all in there. Thanks, Dale. I'm just jerking on you here a little bit. Come on. So anyway, that's silver baths, which is just, I want to bring you some tidbits of stuff you probably haven't heard before about every little single operation that we go through here. And here it is again. Mr. Halsack graces us with his editing job on the wet Collodion developers. The developers employed in wet plate photography are numerous. Boy, you got that right. And unlike those used in modern day dry plate method, they do not require an accelerator, thank God, but work in an acid state. Keep that in mind, right? Acid state. We're going to drill pH. We're going to drill basic and acidic. We're going to drill, because that's how this process, those are some of the parameters this process works on. So it's real important. They consist merely of a reducer, a restrainer, and a medium for holding the water. I call it the carrier. I call the water the carrier. The reducer, iron, right? The restrainer, acid, right? And the carrier is the water. Notice, he did not include alcohol in there right at this moment, but check this out. To this, for convenience in making the solutions flow evenly, is added a small quantity of alcohol. See, he won't even include it in the main address. More and more as I go on with this, I think people get a little too free with the alcohol, or they live in a human environment where they don't need that amount of alcohol. Me being the author of some of this stuff, I live in a very dry climate, so alcohol is kind of important to me, specifically for the Collodion. But I'm trying to emphasize now to back off of that alcohol a little bit. Back off in your developer. So add a small quantity of alcohol. As this subject will be dealt with in a later section, it is not necessary to pursue the subject further. Basically what he's saying, and this is the general rule, if you have a fresh bath or a slightly used silver bath, don't add any alcohol to your developer. Only add alcohol to your developer after you've worked that for a while and you start seeing sweeps or islands or things where it's not flowing, because now you're getting that competing solvent in the bath with the developer, and you're knocking heads there when you go to develop it. That's what creates the sweeps. So he goes on to talk about pyrogallic acid, double sulfate iron sulfate, ferrous sulfate, and ammonium may be employed as the reducing agent. Development may be carried out in a dish, but more frequently the plate is held in the hand. This is why I tell people, please, if you can avoid a helper tray or those kinds of things, especially for smaller plates, develop by hand. You have more control. It's just a better way to learn. This is what I really brought this section out to you for, because I got an email about this week. No, it wasn't Jerome's. It was somebody else's, but they just mentioned it in a side column. What can I reuse my developer? This is what Mr. Haslak, the editor, says. The iron developer may be used repeatedly, but it is not advisable. So for you guys out there using developer over and recycling that stuff, you've got to remember how the process works and what you're doing when you recycle that stuff. I know people do it. I get it. So there's some wet developers. And one more. This is my last one. How about this from our good friend, Mr. J. Towler, Dr. Towler, published in 1864. Silver Sunbeam. Probably one of the most widely recognized wet plate books that we have today. Let's talk about black varnish. One of the first things I'm going to do is create some black varnish and show you some test plates with this. But what I wanted to point out here was, he says, same size of the plate, or we may apply a coating of black varnish either to the collodion surface or to the posterior surface of the glass. If the varnish is on the background, be applied to the collodion side, the picture is not laterally inverted, meaning that if you want to put the black varnish on the collodion side, you'll peer through the glass and that the image won't be laterally inverted. The text will be correct, people will be, all that stuff, right? He said the picture is not laterally inverted, but it loses considerably in transparency by the intervening collodion. I would take issue with that, but that's okay. In consequence of this inconvenience, the background is generally placed on the side of the glass without the collodion. So what he's saying, you can put it on the collodion side, but because the collodion impedes, which I don't think it does, put it on the glass side, right? So there's a great formula right there for black varnish. Painting turpentine, asphaltum, and Canadian balsam. A plasticizer, the actual asphaltum, the actual road tar, and the solvent. Perfect. Mix these ingredients together and dissolve by a little gentle heat. Afterwards, filter and preserve in a well-corked bottle. You read in chapter 7, I show you how to make ferrotype batter in my book. That's what this is. It's ferrotype batter. And you can use it to black varnish, whatever you want to do. I'm going to do 2 experiments. I got them in my book here. I'm going to make some original asphaltum black varnish from the 19th century like this. And I'm also going to add that into some existing varnish, some gun Sandorak varnish, and see what happens when I start playing that way. But that's the last one I had. And here's a little treat that I shared years ago. I say, oh my God, I found unicorn tears. I have a little collection of ambrotypes. This is one of my quarter plate ambrotypes with asphaltum on the collodion side of the plate somewhere in 1870s. And they got the asphaltum all over the glass side of it on the front and didn't bother to clean it off. I took it out of the holder to show you that. But there it is, 1870 something, beautiful little ambrotype. They hand colored, but it looks like it kind of, some of it may have washed away with the varnish. I'm not sure. If a red collodion is used, could the mineral spirits in the asphaltum mix destroy the collodion? No, that's all over and done with now. You're stable there, Samuel. That's a good question. What Samuel's referring to there is sometimes if you use old red collodion, not pyroxylene or nitrocellulose, can be weakened. It gets weak. It's older. It breaks down. Iodine weakens that structure, cotton. And then you pour varnish, which has got 95 or 96% alcohol in it. You'll melt the image. So you have to dilute that varnish down with some distilled water so it doesn't melt that image away. So Samuel's asking, if an old red collodion is used, could the mineral spirits in the asphaltum destroy the collodion like in varnishing? No, it's set at that point. You'll be fine, especially as the carrier. Nothing's blasphemous here. I might be blasphemous, but could you use a standard can paint? Oh, you know what? You can, but I can guarantee you it won't last. And I'd never spray paint on the collodion side with a modern paint. There's just too many compounds in there that will interact and mess with both the gun cotton, both the collodion, dried collodion, and the silver. So I wouldn't do that. I'd go back to the old tried and true method. Asphaltum is completely innocuous to silver bath. Holds collodion, it's brilliant, it's bright, the sheen and the reflective quality for ambrotypes, beautiful, and tintypes. Some folks recommend actually adding mineral spirits to asphaltum. Yeah, that's what you do, Dale. That's exactly what you do. That's how you make ferrotype batter, right? I mean, that's what this is. So anyway, I wanted to show you that. So there is some proof. Lawrence, you ready to come on? You can unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. Oh, one more question here. Sorry, 1 second. Could one use a colored varnish, say orange or brown tint, and dry, and then asphalt them over this? I think you could. I've never considered that, Chopper. I think you could. Yeah. And again, it depends on what color, what is it that you're adding to the varnish. But yeah, interesting. I think you could. All right. One more. Let's see. Dried albumin layer on collodion before spraying modern acrylic. Yeah, John is saying he'd put he'd pour albumin a layer on the collodion before spraying modern acrylic. Here's the problem with albumin too, though, Jan. You know, albumin or egg whites, if you read the literature on albumin prints, you'll read that they yellow and fade so quickly because of the egg white, because of the breakdown of the egg whites. So be really careful on the products you're using. I would recommend that you varnish the collodion side and then spray an acrylic or whatever you're doing on it if you're going to do that, because then you have a really solid archival protective barrier over that silver and collodion. That's what I do anyway. So anyway, okay, Lawrence, it's all you, buddy.
Thank you for having me, Quinn.
Thank you for coming. We greatly appreciate it.
Okay, yeah. Last time it was September, I believe, in another Q show, and I really liked it. But I've been busy, too busy to follow your streams on Saturday Live. So I follow them on YouTube. So it's a pleasure to follow you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I always say, you guys, if you're making photographs or doing something, that's much more important than coming into the show. So, and you, like you say, you can always watch it later. But I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate you coming on again. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to look at here?
Well, mainly I'm a portrait photographer, and I've been using the wet plate. I'm doing wet plates for more than 5 years now.
Great.
And it really got started from your book and some mentors in the Netherlands.
Great.
And last week you had Arold van der A also joining your show. He's one of my mentors, was one of my mentors, and I see Gerard van der Vreu is not a mentor of mine, but we are co-wet platers in Holland.
Oh yeah, and, of course,
yeah,
of course.
And we follow each other on the Instagram.
Nice.
And also on other Facebook wet plate groups. So it was
go.
really a joy to see him, to see his body of work.
Good.
So
good.
We know each other.
If you would have known me 10 or 11 years ago or 15 years ago when I lived in Europe, I was in Holland all the time. I'd be invited up to the Netherlands probably 6 times a year. Universities, colleges, art centers. Mm-hmm. I taught a lot in Holland. Jeroen used to have me up quite a bit. Peter Bruegel art school over there. I can't remember where it was, but anyway, yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands. I loved it.
Yeah, and what we see in the Netherlands is that there's a group of photographers, wet plate photographers, who really produce some nice work, and we also work together. We've got questions or whatever. We always ask. So the community is growing in the Netherlands.
Wonderful. That is awesome.
Yes.
Who are we looking at here? What are we looking at here?
It's also a fellow wet plate photographer. His name is Engelbert. He lives in a town called now we're going to pronounce Dutch words. Enschede. like Gerard, Gerard.
Yeah.
We have some harsh G's and R's in our language, but this one is a picture of him using the Dallmeyer Portrait 3B lens, and I really love these old lenses because of the petzval characteristics. So That's a difficult word.
Yeah.
But I also
I have
like,
a whole bunch of difficult words.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, all those different words. But what I like in this picture is also that I missed some spots while flowing the plate.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we
And
talk about just for since we're really going to talk about kind of the technical here on your work, for you guys that are, and ladies, for you people that are just looking at this, what Lawrence is talking about here are these what we call developer islands at the top of the plate there. Those black islands, they're islands. That means that we were just talking about this. That means that he didn't have enough alcohol in his developer for the silver bath he was using. Just as a side note. So go ahead, Lawrence.
yeah, and that is and these folks are really like in this process. So rather than producing a good portrait, I really fell in love with this procedure because of the folds they can emerge. Most of the time you don't want them, but sometimes they are really a gem. So
Yes.
that's why I use this plate. I usually work in a studio. I have my lights controlled by studio lights, flashes. And like I said, I make my chemicals my own, and that's why I always have the freshest chemicals available. So I use Broncolor studio lights for this type of photography, and they are always set around 3200, 4800 joules. So not full power, but a notch down, like I said.
Are you wide open on it? Are you wide open on this 3B?
No. I have made my own water slot for this lens, and it's about f4-ish,
Yeah.
something more, because on wide open f3, it's the depth of field, the sharpness within it is so marginal that even if the guy in front of the portrait is slightly moving, you're already out of focus. So
yeah,
that's why I made my own water slot concerning about f4-ish. Yes.
Yes. Beautiful portrait. It really is. It's well lit. This is what I try to ask people to consider when they're making their photographs. Hank from Holland is here. We've had discussions about this, about Hank's work in the past, about overexposure. And I think last time we talked about a little bit of underexposure on yours, is separating the head from the background and stuff. This is a beautiful portrait, regardless of the developer islands. Well exposed. The depth of field is absolutely gorgeous. I'm a frustrated painter, so I love to do portraits with this part of the human, an interesting shirt or an interesting clothing or even skin. It's magnificent. It is, you're right. And when you can pull this off like Lawrence has here, if you were to hold this plate in your hand, I bet you dollars to donuts, this is almost three-dimensional. This is what an ambrotype or a positive can produce for you in the wet plate process. People think I'm being mean and I'm critical with people. I'm not at all. I'm just saying, man, you can get so much more out of this process. You're losing so much of the beauty of this by overexposing just a little bit. You lose all that beautiful detail and all this. And that's why we had this big conversation the other week about copper sulfate and developer. Like, who's using this stuff? Why would you use processing work chemistry in a soft, subtle, underexposed ambrotype negative, producing an ambrotype? Beautiful exposure, beautiful portrait of this gentleman. I really like it. I mean, I know you're a commercial photographer, so we're not going to talk about any concepts here or anything. But as commercial work, technical work, beautiful portrait.
Yeah. Mostly I get asked what light do I use. Well, like I said, I use a Broncolor Pulsar 8 system, which is an older system, but I mainly use a beauty dish for my portraits and a curved eyeliner Westcott bounce underneath it, just to fill in the neck part.
Yes. Can I tell you what happened? Let me do this real quick. I'll be right back. I just have to show you this. What happens when light comes in? This is your subject, and here's your camera. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. When light comes in and hits this, and you're trying to get light back here, that'll hit that, and this will come back here or come back here and drop off immediately. There's no carry with collodion. This is the biggest mistake people make, or they think their light's going to wrap around like film or digital. It's not going to. It's going to drop off immediately. It's going to just hit it and go down. That's why you need supplemental bounce light or something in the background. Light will hit it and go off. And the spectrum we're talking about here is so limited. And it's interesting that you get, you say you have color strobes. Now, I know back in the day, they didn't do this as much, but they're doing it a lot now on these more modern, I don't even know, I haven't been in the business for so long, but that slight UV coating. And that's why, like on the modern lenses and everything, you don't even have to have hoods on them because there's no light refraction or bending or anything like that. But it's amazing you can get this kind of color, and it's probably due to your recipes you're using, and the techniques you're using, things like that. But this would be, I would be able to say that this isn't a natural light portrait because I can just tell, but this quality and the depth and the 3D of this that you've captured here is the same kind of quality you get with actinic or natural light. So that's a good find there for you.
I found also a sweet spot with my, of course, my Petzval lens and my studio light setup.
Yes.
Because in my commercial work, I also work with studio lights, and
yes,
I aim always to make it look like a daylight portrait.
Yes,
and,
you did a great job, Lawrence, on this. A great job. Yes. Can I explain one more thing here too? When Lawrence says he found a sweet spot on his let's say his Dallmeyer 3B. So you got a piece of glass this big around. You have convex and concave in the front, convex and concave in the back. One set's glued, one set's not. These were hand ground. This is an 1870 something lens you've got. So that big round piece of glass like that is ground by hand like this, right? So right in the center of it, there's just beautiful tack sharp. It's like 3-dimensional quality. You could just reach in there and get your hands on. That's right in the center of the lens. So people ask me, why do you have a modern camera, Quinn? Why don't you use a vintage camera? That'd be much better. Because I use vintage lenses, and I have this spot, and I've got to move it around and get it on somebody's eye. I can't move the person, so I need swing, tilt, shift. I need all of that to help me get that sweet spot right where I need it. I see so many portraits using vintage lenses, especially f4 and below, or faster, that look good, and then you go in on them, and the focus is over here, the focus is on the ear, the focus is here, the focus is up here. It's because they couldn't manipulate that sweet spot. They couldn't get that sweet spot where they wanted it. So if you can dial that in, that's half the battle. I'll talk about Petzval lenses one of these shows, and really we'll do a deep dive on configurations of lenses and coverage and what they do and what they don't do and why people would use them. I can definitely, though, tell when people use the Russians started this years ago, modern coated lenses with strobes. You just, that skin tone and everything. That's why this is kind of unique to me, because the skin tone is more to the actinic kind of reference you get for collodion. So good job on that. Really good job. Here you go.
Can you make a close-up of it?
Yes, I can.
And especially so around the eyes?
Yes, I can. I think I can.
Okay, if it's not possible, it's okay.
Hold on. I can. Let me do a different screen here. Hold on. I will. I do want to get around the eyes here. Files. Where's Lawrence? There's Lawrence. And this one. Here we go. Let me do this. I'm going to get around the eyes here.
Dag Henk from Holland.
Hank from Holland. Here, this will get you around the eyes here, I think. Whoop. Okay, here we go. Share my screen. And here we go, application. See, I notice your focus here is actually on the middle part of the bridge of his nose.
Yeah. His eyes are a little bit deeper behind in his head. So,
Yes.
and that's exactly what you say about finding a sweet spot in your lens.
Great example. Thank you, Lawrence. That's wonderful.
And in the overall picture, you can't really see that the eyes are out of focus a little, but on when you close in, you see it much more. The reason why I made this portrait is because we have a event every 2 times a year, which is called the Battle of Groenlo, where the Spaniards and the Dutch were liberated. And it's an old event where everybody reenacts this war, this battle, and this is one of them. And what I really like about this picture are his eyes. He has these blue eyes, and with the Collodion process, you get everyone with warm tinted eyes. It will get blackish, a bit claw-like eyes. But if you have blue or gray or eyes, it will become like a husky dog-like picture. And that's what I found so fascinating about this Collodion process, that those eyes, they really pop out.
The way it sees color and renders color.
It renders colors on such a beautiful way. Even the cold colors, the blue and the grays, and it really does a magical trick on it every time. And I know what the process does, but it's really a joy every time when the picture goes into the fixer and turns into a positive.
Yes. So I've got a question for you here, Lawrence. Can you see these spots on this gentleman's nose and on his cheeks in real life? Can you see all this on his skin?
No. That's
these look like lesions from sun exposure. So when the melanin is damaged from the sun, the Collodion process works on the UV spectrum, right? So we're looking at UVA and B, and so when you photograph him, the Collodion will actually penetrate. The light will penetrate. The most sensitive will bounce back. The UV, it'll ignore the surface of the skin and go under until it hits something that shows. And that damaged melanin on his nose and his cheeks come back. And same response, right? It's looking underneath the skin. That's why when you put sunblock skin protection on and you photograph someone in Collodion, they look dark. Or you have contact lenses that are UV protected or glasses that are UV protected, they go dark. It's the same principle because it's working on those premises. And another thing is what I really like here, I mean, I love the image is beautiful. He's got such an intense look, and the context of it helps a lot. I love that I can see exactly your light setup. I don't need to ask you what you've done here. I zoom in and see exactly what you've done. I do that with all the photographs. And so you can see, just for people watching, and if you're a commercial or a professional commercial photographer, this is just child's play to you. You know this already. But zoom in on portraits and look in their eyes. Look at the catch of light in their eyes. You can see 2 dishes, or you can see a beauty dish and a fill, or you can see a bounce and a this and a that. Just zoom in and take a look and study these photographs, and you'll get a good idea of what the photographer, the artist, has done or tried to accomplish. Love the uniform. Love the hat. I'm glad you gave us context on that, because, that's a very interesting, kind of like the American Civil War people here.
Reenactment,
Reenact. There you go. So let's go back to share screen and go back here and look at his other one here. He's got one more portrait and then a couple of still lifes. Here again, same thing, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing. The reason why I chose this portrait is because I'm already also working on a new book, which concerns only wet plate portraits. And the book was called Fading Faces, and it portrays people in the last stages of their life. They are ill, mostly cancer struck, and I really like these pictures because it's a weird way to say they are so intense, they are so they are so pure, and you can imagine that when you're in your last stages of your illness and no treatment will help you. Those people mostly get a kind of serene, we call it, how do we say it? Calmness or acceptance over them, and you can catch that feeling. You can catch them being in that state. So it's before the illness really kicks in its last stages. So, and I really like this wet plate photography. Really is meant to be, to make these kind of pictures, because they are so pure and they're so in your face, and that's why I chose this. This is the first one.
Well, Susan Sontag says photography is memento mori. It's there. We're constantly reminded of. It's an act. One day I'll go into this. I'll do a whole show on this. In fact, I've been working on it, doing research for a while. I'm going to do a presentation on the denial of death, death anxiety, and terror management theory, and death anxiety photography as a death denying tool. And it's all based on Becker's research and theories. And what I'll present is just like this: having conversations about making photographs, powerful photographs of these people with the context of illness or death approaching. And Susan Sontag says that the very act of photography is what Becker calls a buffer against death. We're so paranoid, we're so frightened of our impending death that we repress it. Freud says we repress sexual things. Becker was on to the real thing based on Otto Rank and other people. We repress our death anxiety. That's what creates all of our subconscious, unconscious activities and what we do. And so I'm really interested in photographers and artists that are working in this process and dealing with ideas of death. Or there's photographers working in this process dealing with the idea of death. I see images. Jan, I have to bring you up. I see images of Jan's with his clock and his little cup and his little thing. That's basically a Veneta. That's basically a death anxiety Veneta. I mean, I don't want to armchair psychology anybody here, but those kinds of things are what I'm talking about. This is a good example as well, with the context of that information, Lawrence, you just gave. But this act of photography is all, we're trying to stave death up. We're trying to we want immortality. Homo mortalis, right? You've heard of Homo sapien, Homo erogenous, Homo whatever it is, right? Homo mortalis, the eternal man. That's what we're after. But anyway, that was my thesis, Mark says. Well, I'm going to write another one, Mark, and we'll compare theses. Sorry. It sounds too close to the word shit. Theses and feces. Maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. Sorry, Lawrence. I didn't mean to hijack your show here.
No, it's okay. But in regard to what you've said last about UV and how skin tones are captured with Collodion.
Yes, sir.
For example, people with skin cancer, you can see the cancer in their faces. Not normally when they come to your studio, you don't see anything. But after you've made the portrait, the wet plate portrait, you actually see the cancer.
Yes.
And that is so the first time it's so intimidating, and the longer you look at it, and even the men or women in front of the camera, they're really not happy, but they really have so much respect for this picture, because they really see the illness, they really see the cancer.
Yes, like a physical,
yeah, and that's so intriguing with this kind of photography.
It is, yeah, and when you start getting into things like we were just talking about, when you start laying, so I don't know, Lawrence, if you know this or not, because I don't know you well enough, but when you start there's a separation, right? Let me just put it this way. It's hard to look at photographs sometimes unless the person's in your presence, because we just come and we lay all of our filters on the image, we project onto it without any information. We just say, oh, that's a guy in a t-shirt, he hasn't shaved in a few days, he doesn't look that happy. We kind of describe it looks like an old process. If you knew what the process was, you'd say, oh, it looks like a tintype or what Collodion image. So like Terry Barrett says, you describe this image, but then we come to a point where that kind of description falls short of what the intention of the photograph was. And so when you fill that context in around that, and you tell us who this is about and your intentions and what you're doing, that kind of transcends commercial work or work we do for money or work we do to try to pay the bills or whatever. That kind of transcends that, and that's going into your own personal journey and
photography. Yeah.
Well, it's going into your own personal journey about your own Socrates, the Socratic method. You're examining yourself through doing this, is what I'm trying to say. Now, you pulled psychology and philosophy in. This isn't about money. This isn't about getting the next publication or anything. This is what you're interested in. This is what you're fascinated by. This is what you have questions by. This is what I call artwork versus commercial work that you do for money and you try to sell the images, do all this kind of stuff. So there's a line there. So I never know what we're really talking about if I don't know the person. I don't know if we're talking about commercial work. I don't know if we're talking about fine artwork. I don't know. We need to put it in that context. So with your description of this, I understand what you're trying to do, and it makes the image very different, right? I mean, it changes how we view that image. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And then let's go to your still lifes real quick here.
Yeah, due to Corona, and everybody has this bug. My studio sessions and my portrait sessions were reduced, so I really started to look into selling art stuff or pictures for like fine art things. So I really started to develop these little stills of flowers in a white ceramic beaker, and made a lot of it. And I really like this work because it's out of my comfort zone. I've never done it, and these objects in these pictures are so small, are really 2 or 3 centimeters long. And that's it. So I really stretch out the bellows of my camera to get almost a macro picture of it. And I really love the whites in it and the clean pictures, the way they came out. So these were made in Corona times. I've made I think about 30 or 40 of these things, all different. And they got all sold. So I, instead of making portraits, I'm also selling fine art right now.
Oh.
So that was
Tell us about what you're doing there.
Again?
Tell us what you're doing there. You're selling fine art. What are you selling?
These things are I print them in 50 by 50 centimeters pictures, frame them.
Oh.
And
gotcha.
Instead of my income,
well, good for you.
Yeah, so I
need a gig like that, Lawrence. What's up?
Again? Yeah,
I need a gig like that. What's up? No, I'm
you need to get creative in these times.
Yeah,
because,
that's great. And you know what? It looks like the little coronavirus a little bit.
I hope not.
It does.
It's a cute virus then.
I thought it was the coronavirus.
No. It's just an artsy, flowerish.
I got you.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's really good. I really like this one. The high key nature, and then the contrast to they look like dried leaves or something in that little bowl dish, and then how it fades off to the side. That's really nice. I like.
Yeah, it's a little flower dried up, and it's in a little white ceramic beaker. And what I tried to do in both images was to get a sort of high key-ish wet plate, so not with all the whites blown out, but also have the
very good job.
yeah, the curves into the ceramic beaker, and really placed the no water slot. So this is f3 with the same Dallmeyer lens,
Yes.
and I've placed my depth of field exactly in the middle of this flower,
Beautiful.
and it came out so beautiful.
It did.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little secret? Your
Well,
setup that you just described right there, minus I use natural light, but I used the Dallmeyer 3B wide open to do the cover of my new book, The Rabbit Skull Sitting on the Gallnuts.
okay.
That's the same Dallmeyer 3B wide open, the same, almost identical. Mine was 6x6, but I love how you've left a little tray, the silver string marks on the sides of your plate there, just a proof of process. A wet collodion photographer would recognize those real quickly and see that. You did it on the other one as well, which is really nice. That's great. Great job, man.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you came back in. You had some new stuff to show and talk about. I love your end of life thing. Come back when you have some more portraits on the end of life.
I will.
I mean, come back anytime, of course, but I mean, to show some work is awesome.
Thank you.
Jeff Snyder. Oh, this is interesting. Concerning what collodion will reveal or hide. I know where you're going there. I know where you're going. Let me show. Thank you for those, Lawrence. Does anybody have any questions or comments for him? That's great. Let me do this. Jeff, I don't know Jeff Snyder. I don't think. Do I know Jeff Snyder? His name sounds familiar, but anyway, welcome, Jeff. Let me see if I can show you this. I don't know if I can or not, but I'll try. I think this is where Jeff is going. Talking about what collodion sees and what Lawrence was kind of talking about there on the quality and just everything about how it renders color. Let's just talk about that just a tiny bit. And I want to show, some of you guys have seen this before, of course, but I'll just share it again because it's worth sharing, I think. Share file. This is long. I think this was 2004 or something. But here you see me in my studio. This gentleman's name is Dan Solis, and sorry, it's just a copy of a newspaper print. The newspaper called up and said, "Hey, Quinn, we want to do a story on you for the cover of this newspaper art section." I said, "Yeah, sure." So I came over to my studio, and I said, "God, who should I photograph?" I called Dan up. He had a tattoo studio in town. I said, "Dan, can you come up? I want to do a photo of you for the newspaper." He said, "Sure." So he came up, and we did these. And I always show this to people to show how he transformed in collodion. You see no tattoos on him. The UV light just penetrated all of that and just totally changed what it reflected back onto the plate or what the plate could see. Again, collodion going underneath the skin to reveal the melanin. And there, and if you could see, I think that was an 8x10 plate. If you could see that in hand, it was just perfectly glistening, beautiful skin. He actually cried in the dark room. This big dude saw this plate come up and he cried. He cried. He said, "I look like a warrior." I said, "Well, this is an interesting thing to consider when we're working wet clay, to consider color, to consider understand light, to understand chemistry." That's one of my big things. I come on here every weekend, not because I'm getting rich or famous for doing this. I'm not interested in either of those. I come on here to try to help people and grow and understand these subtle things about the process they're using or want to use, some interesting things about it, some safety things about it sometimes, that kind of stuff. But that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about
this is exactly what I mean. Yes.
Yeah. Old example, and my computer is funny. I bring up that other link that Jeff sent, but go take a look at it. It's in the chat. I think it's I think that guy wrote me, the guy that did the work. I think those are from New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken, but I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a whole series about those New Zealand warriors, all tattooed in their faces by their tribals, and they are all photographs and they have all clean faces.
Yeah.
No tattoo scene. So
yes, exactly.
Really,
That
really
I think that's the link he just sent.
Yeah.
And again, early on, I think that publication that I just showed you for mine was like 2004. Early on, I knew because I started out in the early 2000s. I wanted to make a project on tattoos, and I learned real quick they don't photograph, especially if you want to use vintage lenses and natural light. And people write me now and say, how do I get my these tattoos to show up? Make sure they're black or red, skim light, do oblique lighting, use a modern coated lens, and use artificial light. That's the best chance you're going to get tattoos to show up. If you use a vintage lens with natural light and full on, gone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here he says exactly. The article has photos of Maori.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good. Thanks for posting that, Jeff. People can see that in the chat. Linda says, lovely picture. Very nice shot. Really interested with your faded faces. Will it only sell in Nederlands?
I really don't know, because I'm already in the process making this book. Due to Corona, I could not visit all the people, so some already died. Yeah, it's too bad, but it's the book will be presented with a course, a good course, Cancer-Free Holland, KWF we call it. And if a book can be sold anywhere nowadays, so if anyone wants a copy when it's finished, I will get a link to it or a mention to it.
We'll come back on when you have it put together, and we'll plug it for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Absolutely. We got to support each other in this stuff, and it's hard to get your word out there. Everybody's vying for eyeballs and attention, and so when you have something unique and worthwhile, we should share that, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting today. I really appreciate that, Lawrence. Thank you so much for that. People are saying really nice things about your work, so in the comments. So
I would say great work, Lawrence.
Excellent.
Top.
Thank you, Al. Thank you.
Cool. So recommended reading. Oh my God, are we 2 hours in? I guess we are. Sorry. Recommended reading. Working Stiffs. I'd show you these books. I don't have my bookshelves up yet. I will soon. Working Stiffs. If you haven't seen this is just a wonderful, this will inspire you. This is an amazing book for tintypists, collodionists, occupational portraits. Really high on my list. I'm very interested in occupational portraits. I think it was Samuel asking me the other day. I was talking about one project I'm starting. He says, when are you going to do those great big portraits of people? And I said, well, that's something I probably will do kind of on my own. Blacksmiths, farmers, kind of finding jobs that are kind of going away now that won't be around in 5 or 10 years, maybe 20 years, whatever, and doing these environmental occupational portraits. This book, if you have any interest in that at all, this is a wonderful book to get. It's just, you'll find it inspiring and very, very interesting. It's a tiny little thing too. I don't know, maybe 60 or 80 pages or something, but very, very good. If you don't have it, you should grab it. And I wanted to say as well too, and I'm going to pull this up real quick. For those of you that were in the show a few weeks ago, and I lose track of time, so I can't tell you when it was. I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to share this. I want to show you, this is recommended reading too. I just bought one of these from them the other day, or I put my name on the list anyway. Go, if you can, go support John and Colleen Graybill, the Edward Curtis Foundation. They're selling, or they're taking Kickstarter or something. I don't know, it was 50 or 60 bucks for the unpublished Alaska. Edward Curtis, they're publishing this book of never before seen portraits of Curtis's work in Alaska. And it's a great cause. Obviously, they're helping Native Americans and all that stuff, which is wonderful. So I wanted to pitch that as recommended reading as well, too, because they're great folks doing wonderful stuff, and they need support. So, and we all need support when we're trying to do these great big projects, and that's a huge one. So I want to throw that out there. And then one more thing I'll just share with you real quick. Some of you Europeans might get this, but my recommended watching is a documentary called Born Into This about Charles Bukowski, one of my favorite poets and short story essayists. If you don't know who Charles Bukowski is, and you're a wet Collodion photographer or an artist or a photographer, period, you should know who he is. He's, again, a lot of fodder to draw from other disciplines and other ideas and different things. I'll play you this little clip here of him. He's wow. He was born in Germany, and moved to America when he was young, and just an incredible guy. Let's see if we can play this. Can we play it? Yeah, we can play it.
So you're my favorite God's mail?
Yes.
Oh,
We have
great.
the power of best foods to
See,
let you
I hate
hear
ads.
anything
That's why I don't
that's
have
good.
ads on any of this crap. I
What's a
hate
butter
them.
knife?
This is the mail.
Sorry about this.
Now, if I start reading this poem and I hear this man's voice rising above the sound of my poem, I'm gonna kick his ass right out of this goddamn hall. I don't know if I can make this on just 2 bottles and maybe a 3-bottle original. The creative act is done with that goddamn sheet right here. That's where it's done.
Bukowski is devoted to the de-Disneyfication of all of this. Someone has to kick the Mickey Mouse out of our heads.
He was appalled by Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
I used to think, though, I was too ugly for women.
He was doing what he called research.
One night I was in bed with 6 different women. Really simply, on a percentage basis, I treat men worse every time.
It would be nice for me to pretend I'm a tough guy, but I'm not that tough.
It was a struggle for him to write it,
He beat me and beat me.
remembering certain terrible things.
My father was a great literary teacher. He taught me the meaning of pain, pain without reason.
That's
While he was
profound.
drinking all through the 50s and 60s, he produced more poetry than almost any other person on the planet.
The doctor told me, take one more drink, you're dead. See, doctors lie to you often. Bought a typewriter and just started typing. Only this time it all came out poetry.
There is a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock.
And I said, how could you write a novel in 3 or 4 weeks? And he said, fear.
I was reading the LA Free Press, and it says, remarkable, this guy's the writer of the century. You rise to San Francisco for this reading, and my God, it was like the second coming. We didn't have to share the podium. This is a Bukowski event.
If I know you, one more beer, I'll take you all. Forgive me. You have my soul and I have your money.
If you haven't seen him or don't know who he is, I think it's probably worth your while to look at least do a little research. Bukowski is amazing. He's definitely my favorite poet. Had a lot of problems. A lot of people disagreed, didn't like him, but a lot of other people did. So, hey guys, I thank you for joining me. I appreciate everything. If there's anything pressing you want to bring up, I know we're 2 hours into this thing. Sorry about that, but hey, we go how long we go. So, thank you so much. It's great. It was a great seeing everybody. It was great seeing everybody, and it's a great time for Lawrence to come on and share his work. That was good timing for us, and we greatly appreciate that. Join me next week. I'll have something new we'll throw out and see how it comes out in the wash. Ciao. Stay safe. Stay well. Bye-bye. Stay healthy. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you, everybody watching and listening and contributing. Come back next week. Send me your photos. Send me your technical questions, whatever. I don't know what I'm going to do next week, but we'll figure something out. Thank you. Thank you. Ciao.